So did you hear the news last week about the Pentecostal preacher who died? Well, he was engaged in a rather strange religious rite that involved handling rattlesnakes. Apparently, in his view, if one has strong enough faith and has been anointed by the Holy Spirit, he would be immune from rattlesnake venom. He discovered differently last week when the rattlesnake killed him. Today and next week, we're going to be talking about something that very well may have saved this pastor's life had he paid attention. And believe it or not, it has everything to do with the texts or the copies of the texts we have of the New Testament. But first, last week we talked about the distinction between texts and manuscripts. A text is just a given arrangement of words. A manuscript is what it's written on. We don't have the original manuscript, which, as I pointed out last week, is irrelevant because the text that was on those manuscripts has been copied and preserved for us in the 5,700 odd copies of the New Testament texts that we have. That raises a very important question. In the old days, in the early days of phonograph recording, they used to use a term called hi-fi. A hi-fi recording was a duplicate that was high fidelity to the original. You had lo-fi and you have hi-fi. In other words, how detailed is it in capturing the nuances of the original? The question that we might want to ask then is, we have copies of the original New Testament manuscripts. Are they high fidelity or are they low fidelity? Are they reliable? A lot of the question about the reliability of the New Testament text rests on that question. Are these faithful copies? Well, there's a number of ways of going about answering that. The first thing to ask is, well, was there incentive to have high-fidelity copies? Or was there incentive for scribes to be sloppy in copying? Well, there was great incentive to have high-fidelity copies. First of all, remember, this is religious literature. These are letters coming from the apostles of Jesus Christ or other writings out of the apostolic community. These are churches receiving these things. These are words that are held in deep reverence. There's every incentive, if you believe that what we are copying here has the authority of Jesus Christ himself. There's an incentive to copy as carefully as you can, and that is what the evidence shows. These copies are high fidelity. I mentioned before the actual number, if you take the New Testament as a whole. The percentage of agreement between all of these copies is something like 97%. Now that is a remarkable number because, remember, they don't have digital scanners. They didn't have photography equipment. They couldn't take a picture of a manuscript. The only way to get a copy in the ancient world is to sit down and laboriously copy it word for word. A 97% accuracy rate in that kind of copying is remarkably high fidelity. But of course, that still leaves us with that nagging 3%, where the copies are differing from each other. What do we do about that? Is this some devastating thing that ought to strike at the heart of the Christian faith because there's some differences between these manuscripts? The answer is no. We have ways of figuring out what the original reading on the original manuscript might have been. And this is precisely where this becomes relevant for our backwoods Pentecostal minister. You see, had he paid attention when he looked at the book of Mark, and he came to the end of the book of Mark, he read about this strange passage of Jesus saying, "In my name they will pick up snakes with their hands, and when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all." At the very beginning of that passage at the end of Mark, we have this note in most Bibles. The earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have Mark 16, 9 through 20. You see, there's a general scholarly consensus that this text, from which our Pentecostal minister felt obligated to pick up snakes, this text was not actually written by Mark. It did not originally exist in Mark's gospel. It doesn't belong there. Had he known this, perhaps he would have chosen some other way to exercise his faith. Next week, I'm going to talk more about this discipline of figuring out which reading among diverse copies is the original. This is a discipline called textual criticism, and as we learned this week, it might save your life.